Welcome to the Simple Minds podcast, where we look to empower and encourage real conversation amongst men everywhere by unpacking topics on self-help, philosophy, and business. Back again for another week. My name is Travis. I am your host today. We have a full house. Welcome, lads. Good to see you again. We're chatting about why do we make comparisons to others, and we're going to touch on that in a minute. But firstly, the coveted drink. Now, I've pre-cut some lime.
Cut? That's a loose term. Let's get a photo of that.
Well, if I wasn't trying to cut it with a spoon, it would have come out nicely. But anyway, it's separated. And today's drink really goes well with a bit of lime. And Michael, you're going to love me for this one. So today I actually...
That bag is pretty impressive too, bro.
Can we get some... we need a photo of that bag.
Some Aussie natural spring water for our drink.
What are you, mate?
Do you know that your body's 75% water and you have to stay hydrated? And I thought it was a good hydration.
Didn't we not ban people bringing stupid drinks?
When was April Fool's?
I bring a stupid drink like every time.
So I'll pour everyone out one. You can have lime or not.
I want to go back and drink that stupid sarsaparilla thing that Hannah brought.
No, Conrad. It's right behind you.
What, the sake?
It's on the shelf.
Oh, you mean the one that...
The root beer.
The root beer. Oh, the root beer was phenomenal.
Yeah, no,
just ask any Canadian. It tasted like my toothpaste mixed with a bad cola.
You should... we're supporting local. A local brand. The spring is local.
So which spring is it? Which spring are they using?
Gin?
Gin.
Really?
So, supporting local. It's a good thing to do.
So what, they just tap the gin? They just tap the spring
the
water.
gin.
Why do we only get half measures of water?
Still early, man.
The biggest bottle of water I've seen in my life.
Are you worried about splash?
I drink more tequila in my glass. And
I didn't want you to wet the bed tonight. So anyway, so who would like a lime in your water anyway? So
Yes, please.
that's right. I'll just place these in here.
That's it, placebo. Zero effect on you.
These are...
They do that in Mexico to kill the germs.
Really?
Yeah.
Keep the flies out.
That's the corona.
Yeah.
Because the germs would have been killed from that thing.
That's the worst beer.
Thank you.
Anyway, cheers.
Would have been much better than
Another
water.
week. What did you say?
I said it would have been much better than water.
Don't feel hydrated, lubricated,
Whatever.
ready to go. Do you know if you are
Moist.
if you're ever
fucking
lacking
ridiculous.
in oxygen?
This is a joke. Seriously, this is a joke, right?
If you're ever lacking in energy, up your water intake, and you'll see what happens in the next couple of days.
No, seriously, you're
Couple
pulling the
of
piss,
days.
right?
This is our drink for today.
We've got 40 minutes of drinking water listening to fucking your topic. I need a coffee break.
Alrighty. Anyway, let's get started. Why do we make comparisons? It feels like in the last sort of 6 weeks, 5 weeks, 4 weeks, I've had a lot of conversations with people, mainly about self-doubt and self-belief. But one thing that I have noticed in a trend within those conversations is that people comparing themselves to other people so much. And then, when they do that, they feel like shit. And then that kind of creates that massive spiral of feeling like shit, having self-doubt, belief issues. So I just wanted to strip it back into like one sort of factor of that whole topic and try to understand why we compare ourselves to others, but also what the triggers are, for you and other people out there, and what things that we could kind of do to stop yourself comparing yourself to others. Well, I personally think it's a bad thing trying to compare yourself to others all the time, so I don't think you should do it all the time. But so where I wanted to go with, I think emotionally it impacts you in a negative way, and because you're always comparing yourself to another person or another someone on social media who's fake in their Instagram posts, actually they're really unhappy and they're it's just a full bravado. So The question I have for you is, how do we process these emotions or stop them before they make you feel like crap? Is there any actionable items you can recommend? So that's my main question for the topic. And then the other one is, what triggers do you personally have that you come back to before you compare yourself to others? So my one is self-doubt. So if I ever feeling like shit creatively, photographically, I actually, then start comparing myself to others, and it makes me feel worse. And that's where I get into that vortex of like a circular motion. So if I work on my self-belief, my self-doubt, and I don't allow myself to feel that way, then I actually feel better about myself, and I don't compare myself to others. It's something that I've worked on for a very long time. I'm not perfect at it. Sometimes I'm not great at it, but sometimes I am good at it. Does anyone want to chime in on some of their triggers? Or
doesn't it depend largely on the perspective you're coming from? Because comparison is not necessarily a bad thing either, depending upon how you use it, right? Because let's say I've been following, and not that I compare myself, but using someone like a Warren Buffett to follow and aspire to. Would that not be a reasonable comparison? I mean, not the wealth part, but the way he goes about doing his business part.
But isn't that trying to learn from their mistakes and failures
that's a modelling approach, right? Which I think is comparison. But
what
came to my mind, it is comparison, but what came to my mind there is I also, it's about the perspective, like you said, Conrad, because if you're constantly seeking to grow and have a growth mindset, and you're looking to compare to people that you believe are, I guess, further along or doing more or have habits that you want, that's positive. But I also see a lot of people comparing themselves to someone worse off to tell themselves that they're okay now. So it depends on what lens you've got on and which angle you might be comparing yourself with a peer and just saying, hey, we're similar. But a lot of times I do see people go, well, we're better off than those guys. Whatever that looks like, whether that's so they can make a quick decision that they probably shouldn't make. Let's call it a financial decision, for example. They're like, well, we've got more than those guys, we're fine. So I do think it's very much a perspective piece on how you're looking at it.
And how you use
it. And what are you
Yeah.
using it for?
Well, it's like you can have an infection in your toe and you think the world's ending, but really, like, someone's got cancer that's next to you. So you're comparing yourself in that fact. You're actually using that to put yourself into perspective and go, well, it's not actually that bad, really, is it?
The in reading through what you provided, Trav, there's a quote from Theodore Roosevelt, a former American president. I don't know the number because I'm not that well schooled. I'm an immigrant to this country.
To which country?
I don't know which country I'm in at the moment. Comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
So I guess if the inverse of that was probably true, the more joy you feel, then the lack of comparison.
But does that fly sort of against what you initially said in regards to using comparison
I think
as a motivation?
Perspective is the challenge there, right? So if you're happily following somebody through a comparison mindset or comparison theories, then you're okay with that. But if you're doing it from a lack of joy, so from an anger perspective, or I don't have as much, or I don't look as good as, or all those types of things, that negative comparison, so that growth versus fixed mindset scenario, I think that's a really interesting point to look at the word comparison from.
Yeah, I think it can start definitely as a motivation piece, and I think you can, like the envy piece we talked about lots of episodes ago, I think envy can be very powerful if you use it to your advantage. So I think comparison can work really well, even if it is a negative to begin with, as long as you're mindful enough to look at somebody and go, okay, bigger, stronger, richer, better looking, whatever, and then kind of process that, stop, and then use it as a positive, use it as a motivation to move forward. Because I think comparison is probably a biological thing. It's probably something that as I don't know, 200,000 years ago, bigger, stronger person over there gets the mate, so I need to be like that, I suppose. So maybe there is a biological element.
Well, that was my thought. Does a caveman look at another caveman and go, "Well, he's got a better cave"? How do I get that cave? Or I'm not worthy of this life because he's got a massive cave and I don't have a cave.
Well, I think we're social creatures, right? So I think it's a fundamental of our nature as an animal, I guess you could say, because we are a social creature, and I find. Yeah, I mean, it's perspective. I think I work in a creative field, and I find comparison has always been at the core of everything you do. Like when you're creating like visual works, I actually attribute sometimes the comparison to some of our success in our local city, you could call it, because we always referenced the East Coast, which had a better quality product. So we were always like chasing, I guess, the modeling piece. But I have found myself in moments of self-doubt, and like when I'm tired or frustrated or in those valleys, when you compare and you do go down a spiral, what helps me is actually where we started, is then kicking into perspective. And so like I'll look at someone else's piece of work, which is common, and I'll be like, why can't we do that? Or why can't I do that? Or like, surely. And then you find out that they've got 10 years worth of experience or 15 years, and they've been doing it for like 4 or 5 times longer than what you are. And then you're like, oh, yeah, okay, I'm just on my journey, and I've still got a bit of work to do to get there. And I think a common one is when you're modeling, where it becomes dangerous, and we had an experience in this, I guess, with a couple of us here, was when you're referencing those people of their success of where they are like now versus where you are. So like you don't backtrack someone who's successful to the same reference point as like where they could be with you. And so I think, and that's perspective too. So like the one that, Matt, would you be okay if I share about the instance we talked about?
You can't say no there, mate.
On the spot type.
Yeah. Well, we talked about like, I guess, modeling. Like Matt, we talked once upon a time about like kind of looking to Gary Vee. You're in the social media space and stuff like that, and like you can't reference Gary Vee of where he is now, compare yourself to where he is now to where you are now.
Yeah, you might pick him up now, but he's done a body of work before.
Correct. So you need to reference yourself back to when he was like 10 years ago, if you want to have an appropriate comparison. And because you can go down very negative, like, oh, I've been doing this, why don't I have this? But
the ego doesn't let you do that.
Yeah, but you forget about the body of work. So, and the same goes with like when you're creating. So I find that the perspective is the key, because I think you need comparison actually. Because what are you striving towards, like for us anyway? Because if we had nothing, if no one was better than us, like would we naturally, like we don't know what is, we might be already at the top. So why would we keep pushing?
Well, again, that's perspective.
Yeah.
So we sit in a broad community, or even starting with a species, moving down to smaller and smaller little groups of communities. And if you've got that growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, then you'll probably always be looking to add and bring new influences into your community as you move more into the space that I think you want to. And I think that can change depending on your interest at the time as well.
I think the words we're just using at the moment are quite interesting. I mean, the word comparison versus modelling, I think we're trying to use them interchangeably. I'm coming to terms with the fact they're probably very different. Your modelling is implying action, whereas comparison is probably standing and watching in what's come to me straight away without looking at the definitions of the words. And then going through my notes, comparison puts focus on the wrong person, because you can only control one life, and that's yours. So I think modelling is different to comparison if we're going to become semantic on it.
I see comparison as a negative connotation of the word, modelling as a positive. So you're saying, say Gary Vee, and you're going, I'm going to model on him, and go, that's who I strive to be like. But comparison's going, I'm looking at Gary Vee, and it's like, well,
why am I not Gary Vee?
Yeah, why aren't I, making
so lack of action versus action, right? Yeah.
So, do you see comparison in the emotional sense of, joy?
Yep.
Is it the straw that broke the camel's back down the very bottom that really makes you feel like shit? Or is it one of those first things in the timeline of making yourself feel, rob you of joy?
Well, I think this is the interesting part. It always comes from the framework that your perspective comes from your eyes and your experiences, right? So depending upon how much work you've done on yourself from a self-worth, self-value perspective, will be the lens that you choose to look at most situations. And I think it's a progressive learning, moving from a state of comparison, because I think we've all done it at generally largely earlier. Some might still be doing it, but it's like I said, it's a futile game. I don't think it's a game that you end up happy with all the time.
No, look, there's definitely a sliding scale. Like if I come back to the example that you used with me with Gary V. Yeah, look, I have an agency. It's nothing like what his is and what his is doing, and often, and I'd say that's probably a reflection of my mindset. 80% of the time, I'm using that as a modelling piece, and continually looking at what they're doing and using that to change what the actions we're taking and how we're going about it. Sometimes, which is maybe the 20%, or maybe probably less, but let's say that's 20%. I'm looking at it going, oh shit, like why am I not achieving that? So I think there's always that scale, and depending on where your mindset is at the time, I think you can even look at the same example and look at it both ways. And I think that's the comparison, bottom end, but the top end of the scale, I think, is a modelling to the point of where you're not looking at their outcomes, but looking at their actions and their smaller habits, I think is where you're going with that, Conrad.
Just to go back to what you're just saying, Hato, like what comes first, I guess, is I've noticed going into I don't even call it a mindset, a comparison mindset, when you're not feeling connected with, like, you're not loving yourself, and like you're not happy with who like you are, and you deep down and you know it, and so you're looking for a sense, or your shame, you're full of shame, and so you look to these others who seemingly having those feelings that you desire, and then that's where it starts to rob you from joy. And then obviously when you're on a high, you're peaking, I feel like you compare a lot less. It's when you're in the dumps you start to so I don't know if that answers it, but I guess from my experience, I feel like it starts with feeling a little bit down already, then you compare, and then your joy is robbed.
I know that if I'm starting to compare myself to others, I'm quite low. Yeah, I know that in my sort of emotional...
I'll give you a tip. Compare yourself to me on a basketball court. You'll always feel happy.
I'm going to use that one every day. Man.
Because I guess, like, recently, a few months ago, a really common thread that came out of some really high achievers, they actually always reference themselves in the future and back again. Like... And I guess the only person you should ever compare with or reference is you. Yeah. And that was really big a couple months ago with a couple people. And like one podcast I listened to, I can't remember the individual.
Britney Spears?
Yeah, maybe. And he made this...
Has she got a podcast?
I don't know.
Maybe.
It's a good idea.
Be interesting.
Does anyone like a little bit
I'd love a top up. Sorry to cut you off.
I'm getting a bit dry here. Getting a bit dry.
I'll just top you up just a little bit, Conrad.
But he made a statement of like
feeling energized,
like heaven for him. So they're talking about death, and that heaven for him was that when he dies and he goes and God has essentially a picture, or he meets the person of like what his greatest potential in life was. So when he gets there to the gates and he meets like essentially heaven for him is he's meeting this person and they're a complete reflection. And then hell is someone who didn't live out their potential. So there's a comparison piece, like straight up. And a lot of the high achievers seem to always reference, and I guess it'd be interesting of like, is it just a modeling piece?
Is it a tool for self-sabotaging, not to achieve?
Potentially.
I don't even think it's a tool, man. I mean, it is self-sabotage at its highest. Because, again, it's a game you can't win.
Yeah.
But if you do, we did talk about the positive aspect, or the possibility of it being positive.
So, but I think I clarified, or I tried to clarify it earlier. I think comparison versus modelling is what I was probably trying to come from. If you're modelling behaviour as opposed to comparing yourself to.
No, because I mean that's where I took a lot of notes on this, and that's where I went down, was that you can use it as a tool to progress
if you're taking action.
If you're taking action, yeah. But I think it's something that everybody does, though. Everybody does it, and no matter if you reach your perceived goals of getting richer or having plastic surgery to look better, it's a continual spiral. You will always compare yourself, like.
Well, even watch. I mean, you've got kids, Mike. Even watch what your kids do at a young age, and your kids are older than mine, obviously, but they're doing it from very early on, and a lot of it is modelling, but sometimes it's a comparison around toys or whatever it is. They're comparing to what someone else has,
sure.
And it's inbuilt.
Yep, agreed. It's one that if it's not managed or monitored or
Well, yeah. So how do you harness?
within children,
Just harness that comparison, what's biologically inside of you, and use it for your benefit.
Well,
90% of the time.
again, I
think it's what
don't
we
think you, I
talked
don't
about.
think you can.
It's the
I
self-awareness.
think you've got to be
part.
aware of
Yeah.
it and negate it.
Yeah.
And I think, again, you negate it by, well, what took you to the comparison in the first place, which points you in the direction of what you're not really happy with in your own life, and apply the action into your own life.
It depends a lot on where you take the comparison as well. You can look up to someone like you potentially do, Conrad, to Warren Buffett and say, that's the end of his journey and this is my middle, and therefore I've got time, I've got potential remaining, and go, I'm not there.
I'm not sure Warren Buffett would be too happy hearing that it's the end of his journey just yet.
Yeah.
End of whose journey?
Like late 80s. He's very much.
Right, I reckon
If he was a
he's
book,
on
he'd
a
be the
time
last
bomb.
couple of pages.
early 80s, 82, 83.
What's that?
Buffett.
Late 80s.
87,
88,
88.
89.
And given what he eats during
You're
his
right, Jake.
meetings, he's got
Sorry,
limited time.
Sorry,
management.
Moff. Carry on.
But the mindset of I'm not there yet is where that'll take you down a positive or a negative space. If you go, here's where I'm at, here's where this person is, and I'm never going to reach that, of course that comparison is going to take you to a negative place, knowing that perhaps you desire to be there, perhaps you feel you have the potential to be there, but you just don't think it's going to happen. Or if you look up to someone and you go, that's where I want to go, that's where I have the potential to go, it can be inspiring to go, yeah, there's more for me. I think I've got the potential. So I think it's the comparison isn't the issue. It's your interpretation of it and the direction you take it. That is where it can go positive or
But
negative.
what you just brought up was another interesting point with relation to delayed gratification when it comes to happiness. Because if you're saying, if you're going down that path of using it as a target, and you're going with the I'll be happy when I reach that place, isn't that a tripwire to sabotaging yourself anyway? As opposed to saying, well, yeah, he's there, I'm going to employ all the babies here and enjoy the time I get, so I've got to sit in here and focus on me. I can use that as a modelling tool, but I've got to sit here and focus on me.
Yeah, as long as in the present you're doing the right things to achieve whatever it is.
Yeah,
you're
because
looking at.
that whole I'll be happy when scenario is a big gamble.
Do you not think that when you do use it as a modelling technique and then you actually don't take action, it flips direct to comparison and it flips into a negative?
Probably could. I mean, if you look at it like that, it probably has to because of lack of action, right?
Yeah.
So then it is largely comparison. I'd like to be like, but I'm not going to do that action. That's when you give yourself that frustration.
So you tread a very fine line.
I think it's a very fine line as well as if you don't know where you're going and you're comparing, like particularly with social media, everyone's looking for that thing which they actually don't know what they're looking for. So then they use comparison of like seeing these people on like social, because the majority of people don't really know where they're going.
Yep.
And so I think that's where comparison can be a really deep hole, because you can't pull yourself out of that if you don't know what you really want.
Well, you can't model them, right? And
No.
I'd be curious to hear what you guys think. So when I first started delving into, I guess, more of a growth mindset and reading, and I'd read and consume everything I could about a person. And then I'd be, there's 30% of them that I just do not align with at all and is not me. And then I was like, well, that's a bit odd. So then I'd keep looking for more and more and more. And I realized you have to build out that vision, because using Warren Buffett as your example before, Conrad, there's a lot of things about what he does that I think you would want to sort of follow and model his habits. But then there's other aspects, and let's maybe talk about his health or other things that you would say, well, that doesn't align with how I think. And I think you've got to, without that solid, North Star, as they would say. And you brought up Gary Vee with me earlier. Well, there's a lot of things that Gary does and has done that I would love to achieve. There's also a lot about what he does and his habits and lifestyle that I don't want to do. And so you've got to figure out what that balance looks like. So modeling if you flip into the comparison with anyone, you're going to really struggle if you don't have that sort of belief in yourself and know exactly what you're trying to achieve.
I think you've got to be very truthful to yourself. You're knowing if it's even going to be possible for you to look at somebody, compare yourself, or build a model to get to that. And if you deep down know that you can't get there, or there's something in the way that just is not in your personality or in the way you work. I mean, you could probably work on that. Maybe, I think that's probably a big part of it. Being very truthful with who you are as a person, because we're all very different and different strengths, obviously.
And you just got to be so careful what you're actually modeling too. If you, like you said, you compare yourself to Gary Vee, and we get a very curated version even of his life. Social media is even worse, where you're comparing yourself to this version of people's reality that they've chosen to show you, which is almost always the best aspects of things. I grew up comparing myself to and modeling Lance Armstrong as an athlete. That's what got me into cycling, and that's what got me into triathlons. I loved the idea
That's
of...
what got you into drugs as well.
It's a slippery slope, my friend. And that's not a bad point, actually, Trav, is that if I continue to just model every aspect of him, that may have been the next natural step to say that's how you compete and that's how you win Tour de France's, where I actually modeled and desired to be like the version of him that I knew before, that was a cancer survivor that went on to win 7 Tour de France's, who inspired millions of people to, and through his brand and through all that stuff. But now I look back on it and go, everyone who modeled him was essentially living a life at that time.
Well, I mean, modeling to me can only kick in, it's full circle back to self-esteem and like knowing who you are. Because if I look back to my, say, late teens, I was doing things that I wouldn't, because I compared to others, and you'd be like, then you see someone with this nice car who's gone into like $60,000 worth of debt, and like they're getting everything that you kind of desire. Because
But at that stage, you probably don't know they're in debt.
Probably,
yeah.
And you're very malleable at that age. Like, you just kind of want to, I guess it's the natural. You want to impress people, and you're trying to. And if you're not really in love with who you are, and you're seeing all this stuff around you, and so it's kind of like knowing, having self-esteem and self-worth. And I think a lot of people, is that whole keeping up with the Joneses, which Gary's very known for as well, of trying to look to your neighbor next door, and they got a new car and this and that, and then you go out of your way to essentially go through pain to get that new car to keep up. And but if you don't know where you're going, you just go down that path continually, and it's so common. So I mean, how do you break out of that if you don't have that awareness? Or it's
Go and live in a cave on a mountain.
Well, can I just jump in there? And I saw a great quote on a cafe wall the other day, and it said, beware of keeping up with the Joneses, because they're probably trying to keep up with you.
I don't know any Joneses.
Yeah.
What's got a whale?
Is that scarier?
That's super interesting, actually.
Well,
Yeah.
it's full circle, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and
Because
that's
people
part
could
of
be
it.
looking at you and going,
They are.
I think that's the big thing, that everybody does it. Everybody does. And I think this is the...
but when you're like, I wish I was like them and blah, 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 the irony could be that they're actually doing the same about you. And you're feeling like shit, but they're actually feeling like...
Feeling like shit
You're
too.
feeding each
Everybody's
other
feeling
and
like-
feeding each other's decisions. Good or bad?
Well, it depends on where they're going to, mate.
Good or bad, yeah.
What's
Yeah.
how you value success as well. If you value success in, Maseratis and, houses in Applecross, and it's not actually what you really want in life, it's going to be an interesting journey when you do actually get it, isn't it?
Well, that's what will happen when they get it. It doesn't fulfill what it is that they're really chasing. It's just a continual thing. They then want the next thing, then the next thing,
Well,
and
it's
the next
just
thing.
external factors that made them want that. And I think that's what social media is doing a lot nowadays.
Yeah.
Especially on Instagram, especially on Facebook.
I mean, it's a pretty broad brush. I mean, you're not wrong, but social media isn't the cause of people's comparisons.
It's just increased communication, right?
It's
I
just
think it just
accelerating
amplifies
And I mean, and that's any tool. Like a freaking car amplifies the efficiency of going from one place to another over a bike or walking. So, I think we've got to be very, very careful with lambasting everything and blaming social media to a point too, because as much as it might be disserving, it obviously can serve.
Hey, you started off with you had a lot of these conversations and experiences. What do you? Obviously, you're maybe a bit more aware of it. What do you do? What do you do when you find that you're going down that?
Like I was saying before,
or what advice have you given to
Yeah.
those people that you've been seem to be having these conversations with?
Good question. Like I said before, when I find myself comparing myself to others, that's kind of when I'm not the lowest, but on the journey to the lowest part of where I am at that point in that valley. So I use that perspective piece very much so. And if it is sort of, like say I'm driving this car and someone, you for some reason getting down for not having a nice car, look next to me and someone's in a beat up old Toyota Seeker, and I'm like, I'm much better off than that person, or health wise, similar sort of thing. I use a perspective as that, but I don't try to judge others either in that point. But then again, I try to go back to that self-love piece and go, well, what's actually going on? Because it's not a direct impact on why I'm not happy because I don't have that thing or haven't succeeded in that piece just yet. What is it externally? Is it because I'm not allocating enough time to spend with my family or something that I really enjoy, and that's actually festering underneath, and then I'm getting annoyed, and then I'm losing joy, and then that's coming back and I'm just down. So it's generally a combination of things. So
I think that's an interesting part when you talk about what the actual items you can recommend to try and thwart comparisons. Gratitude's a massive one.
Yeah,
it's remembering what you already have and what you have the opportunity to be grateful for, which is a big action to negate comparison.
Yeah,
Travis,
absolutely.
when was the last time you compared yourself to somebody? Can you think of
Was it John Butler?
He's doing it now by wearing me on his shirt.
Exactly.
I think you do it every day in some certain way, don't you?
Do you?
Just either subconsciously or in a micro scale. On a massive scale, I think every now and then you sort of go, oh wow, I'd love to have that really nice house, and it's like, well, actually, will that truly make me happy? No. Actually spending time with my wife and my son now.
Yeah, and I mean, being a parent is a comparison there, I suppose, as well. Like you compare yourself to other parents and whatever.
But is it a daily thing? I can't say it's daily for me.
Well, on a very, very micro scale, I think everyone... No, sorry, I won't put you in a box. Sorry, Conrad.
Don't do that.
I think a lot of people
I can
would have a thought here and there of something. On the basketball court.
I would go more every day. Like the moment you open Instagram, you're comparing.
Really?
Yeah, I would say you
Even looking at
subconsciously.
your son, right? Surely you immediately, or not immediately, but at some point in looking at him for 60 to 90 seconds, you must think about your childhood a little bit as well, and even compare that and use that as a driver to help you make decisions.
I don't know whether you're fully aware of it.
I don't think
Let's not
compare.
Let's not confuse reflection and comparison. Because I could look at a child and reflect on my childhood, not compare who's got something better than me or worse than me.
Yeah, but we're not all perfect all the time either.
No, I'm not saying that, but I think daily is kind of extreme.
Every second day?
I think
I might compare what I'm eating for lunch or someone, but I mean...
Dwelling on comparison
that's
is
still
probably
the
what
same
you're
thing.
talking
But that's not daily.
Yeah, but it's on a micro
That
scale.
guy's got some nice sushi. That looks good.
I don't like
Wish I
sushi.
had.
I don't know because I can't have the carbs.
Dwelling on comparison is not a daily thing, but I think the act of comparing, modelling, or reflecting, which are probably, I mean, you have to reference something at some, like that's putting a reference and comparing X to Y, and that happens, I would say, on a daily basis.
Like I said, I think there's a very fine line between reflection and comparison in that instance. I reflect daily, right? How was I feeling? So I guess what your reference point is. So reflection to me is more internal than it is external. Comparison's probably external.
There's a lot of fine lines in life.
Yeah, I know, but I know. I think I just take a little bit of it. I don't. Well, I can't say I compare daily. I'm not saying I don't compare.
All right. Well, the next week, just take moments throughout the day to think if you have compared yourself in that day.
And then we can compare notes.
Yeah, and we'll compare notes. But no, I'm not saying you're going to compare yourself in a negative way each day. Just saying.
Well, then are you reflecting or modelling? Is it true? Is it true comparison?
I think modeling's a different thing again.
Oh, yeah, I think it's totally different.
I think modelling is more behaviourally aligned, right?
Yeah.
I want to model myself on someone else's behaviours. No problem.
Modeling's a bit deeper, is a longer term.
Reflection is reflecting on your own stuff. Comparison tends to be external with lack of action.
Well, you have to. I'm just trying to think. You have to make a comparison to be able to. So I'm just thinking. We commonly in my company we've got like a Instagram group where we share like good photos or things like that. You have to compare to make a decision of whether something's good or bad. So you're comparing. If you want to go real micro, like the moment you bring up to go whether that looks fucking awesome or shit, is you have to reference it to something. So you're comparing, and I'm just talking about an image, but you might do that about an article, about a quote,
that's
about
being
a
objective,
person.
right? I think what you're talking about the comparison of self as opposed to comparison of things.
But the comparison of things leads to where we're going. Like we can look at we can look at an image and we can go down into the dumps straight away because it's like, oh, why is my work not that good?
But is that not then again self-love, emotional intelligence stuff that stops you from doing that?
Yeah.
But you're still doing it on a daily.
Yeah.
But your self-love is stopping you from going down.
Whereas some people go into the spiral and
maybe my self-love tank's okay then.
And to what degree does...
Maybe it is. Well, that's what we're saying. You don't dwell on comparing every day, but I think probably just getting caught up in semantics and
into micro.
So what are some
details.
actionable tips? Empty your self-love tank, Conrad?
Gratitude.
No, gratitude's massive.
Perspective.
Gratitude's
Self-awareness.
important.
Self-love.
Reminding yourself no one's perfect. I mean, I've made some notes here. Compete less. Like, fuck, I'm going to
Compete less.
How can you compete left? Like,
well, competition breeds comparison.
Yeah,
life's a competition.
but competitiveness is, or in me, I'm probably at 100% of competitiveness. So how could, even going down the freeway, I want to beat the person next to me.
Not in that car, you can't. Come on.
Well, then use the action to pursue greater things in life is what I've noted down here.
Yeah.
that's an interesting one.
And comparison can be the similarities as well. It doesn't need to be the dissimilar. It can be, oh, look, that person is like me. That's a good thing. It can be a happy place to go.
I think you can use it in a positive way.
Oh, definitely.
Find inspiration without comparison.
Yeah.
That's a
Well,
nice
people
little
connect
note I
on
found.
comparisons.
Yeah.
Like, the moment you meet someone, oh my God, we're the same.
Is that what you
That's
say?
fangirling,
That's
mate.
exactly what he said.
But if,
Fanboy.
It's a different topic, but yeah.
But if
It's
you're-
pretty
yeah.
common for them.
We're going to talk about that next. Or when's that topic come up?
Crazy Rich Justin.
but if you're if you're feeling like shit and you're down in the dumps and you're starting to compare yourself to others, be grateful for what you have.
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest key takeaway.
Go and grab a glass of Aussie Spring Natural, whatever that is.
It was beautiful.
Stick a lemon in it.
Or just
It's a
go. Or
lie.
just go and listen to all of our episodes, and you'll feel better about yourself.
Follow Aussie Natural on Instagram, please.
How was the lime water, Conrad?
Refreshing.
And that's a great episode.
I would have liked a bit of ice.
Alice? You know what?
No,
I
they can't do that.
I had
mate.
to buy a 6-pack because they don't sell the big ones in just one, so I couldn't buy cold ones.
Thank God you're a hippie.
I
mate.
have
You use it the
Aussie
rest of the
natural
week.
water here.
Really?
Could you say you got a case?
I do have a case.
And there's water out of a tap.
Anyway.
Bottled water is the most is more expensive than per litre than petrol.
It is.
That's fucking ridiculous.
Better to drink though.
And Australians drink
bottled
more
petrol
bottled water
instead.
per head
More
of capita
hydrating.
than anyone else in the world.
Oh no, Indonesia.
Per head of capita, mate. They're like they got 20 billion people per square metre over there.
But they can't even drink their own water.
Yeah, but per head of capita, mate.
Anyway, thank you for listening to another episode of Simple Minds.
That's a
you
good
facts.
topic.
Please hit us up with a review on any form mediums, Facebook, iTunes, Spotify. Can you review on Spotify? You can't, can you?
No.
Any
listen.
of those sort of mediums. Reach out to us if you ever have any questions,
And if you're comparing yourself to Travis Hodo, don't.
because you'll feel pretty good about yourself. Anyway, thank you again. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.
See ya.
Ciao.
Champagne.